the 2018 Atlanta Press Club LOUDERMILK-YOUNG Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the race for Georgia governor.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Lisa Ram, Capitol correspondent for Georgia Public Broadcasting. You are watching the Atlanta Press Club LOUDERMILK-YOUNG Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting right here in Atlanta. This is the debate among candidates for governor of Georgia. So let's meet the candidates right now. They are in alphabetical order. First, Stacey Abrams, a Democrat, is the first woman to lead either party in the Georgia General Assembly and the first African-American to lead Georgia's House of Representatives. Brian Kemp, a Republican, has served as Georgia's Secretary of State since 2010. And Ted Metz, a Libertarian, is retired from a career as an insurance and financial professional. Welcome to you all. Now, the time has come to meet our panelists. First, we have Greg Bluestein, a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, followed by Elwyn Lopez. She is a reporter at 11 Alive TV here in Atlanta. And Frank Malloy is an anchor at WMAZ-TV in Macon, Georgia. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's get started. For rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. Next, here we go. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions. Frank Malloy, you get the first question to Ted Metz.
All right. Mr. Metz, welcome. You propose eliminating the state income and property tax and boosting the sales tax to try and make up that revenue. How do you sell that to low-income people on fixed incomes?
It's really easy because we have electronic systems where we can issue a card that would actually use as a discount on the taxation right at the checkout counter. It's simple.
Ellen Lopez, you get the next question for Stacey Abrams.
Ms. Abrams, you participated in a 1992 protest where you burned the state flag. Do you stand by those actions? And what message do you have to people who are concerned that you burned a state symbol even though it had a Confederate emblem?
Well, first, I want to say thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for having me. And I want to say that I'm a very proud Georgian. I graduated from our public high schools. I went to Spelman College here in Atlanta. I left for graduate school and law school, but came back as soon as I could. I came back because I wanted to help build my state, make it a stronger place. And 26 years ago, as a college freshman, I, along with many other Georgians, including the governor of Georgia, were deeply disturbed by the racial divisiveness that was embedded in the state flag with that Confederate symbol. I took an action of peaceful protest. I said that that was wrong. And 10 years later, my opponent, Brian Kemp, actually voted to remove that symbol. What I'm fighting for now, though, is more of Georgia values, making sure that we expand Medicaid so everyone has access to health insurance, ensuring that all of our children get educated at strong schools that understand their needs, and making certain that we create good, prosperous jobs across the state of Georgia, all 159 counties. That's what I want to do because I'm proud of Georgia and proud to be a Georgian.
Thank you. Moving on. Greg Bluestein, please ask a question of Mr. Kemp.
Yes, Secretary Kemp, Ms. Abrams and her allies have repeatedly called on you to resign as the state's top elections official. You've rejected those calls. I've got a 2-part question for you. 1, do you believe you can impartially oversee the state's elections while also running for governor? And 2, your office is required by law to direct a recount. Would you recuse yourself if a recount is necessary?
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening, and I appreciate that question. I took an oath of office to serve as Secretary of State, and that's exactly what I'm going to continue to do. As anyone that knows about elections in Georgia, it's our county elections officials that are actually holding the election, which is going on right now and will be on Election Day. Their local bipartisan election boards tally the votes in the election. They're certified at the local level and then hand-delivered to our office. So I'm doing the exact same thing that Democrat Kathy Cox was doing when she was running for governor. You know, if we have the instance of a recount, that's automatic by state law. If lower than 1%, that again is something that the counties do. And we got a very competent elections team to oversee that process. And I'm certain that there would be a lot of people watching that. And I have staked my integrity of my whole career on the duty that I have as Secretary of State. I've always fulfilled and followed the laws of our state, and I'll continue to do that through the tenure of my service to this great state. Thank you.
Mr. Kemp, thank you for that opening remarks there. Greg Bluestein, we go back to you to ask Ted Metz a question.
Yeah, Mr. Metz, you've promised to cut spending by slashing what you call obsolete, inefficient, unnecessary, and unconstitutional agencies. What specifically would you eliminate? And what do you say to Georgians who might depend on their services?
Get another job. What is that noise?
Unfortunately, we're experiencing an alarm here, and a fire alarm here at our GPP studios, to be exact. The timing?
It couldn't be better, could it?
This right now.
Interesting.
We are going to try and get this corrected for you as soon as possible. I suggest possibly, do we need to take a break? Because out of the fairness and the spirit of this debate, we need to hear every single word that our candidates are saying this afternoon. And we want to be fair to you, the audience, as well. This is live TV, folks. Things like this happen. We're going to take a break and try to fix this problem for you. Stay tuned. You're watching the debate series. The beauty of live TV. We were interrupted a few minutes ago by a fire alarm. We received the all clear here at the studios. We welcome you back to the governor's debate, a really important and historic and iconic debate in the state of Georgia. We're going to pick up where we left off with Greg Bluestein asking Mr. Ted Metz a question.
Take two. Mr. Metz, you've promised to cut spending by slashing what you call obsolete, inefficient, unnecessary, and unconstitutional agencies. What specifically would you eliminate? And what do you say to Georgians who might depend on those services?
The services won't be going away. They will just be replaced or transformed into some other, absorbed into another department. We have 13 transportation agencies in 11 counties around the city. we certainly can eliminate some of those, combine forces, and actually improve government and government services with technology, number one. Number two, with efficiency. Number three, with, again, paring down on the number of employed people we have in the government. What are they going to do instead? They're going to find private service jobs. We have a lot of jobs available in Georgia. They can do something different. We don't need to pay them on government salary to do things that are unnecessary. I have a list on my website of all the different things that can be cut, and I would defer people to that to review.
Mr. Metz, thank you. Frank Malloy, it is your turn to ask a question of Stacey Abrams.
Ms. Abrams, why do you think expanding Medicaid will help people in rural counties who are dealing with hospital closures and severe doctor shortages? And will it even be possible, given that you're going to work with a Republican-controlled legislature?
I spent 11 years in the state legislature, 7 as Democratic leader, and I know how to work across the aisle. And this is one of those solutions to a problem that has been plaguing the state of Georgia for more than a decade. Rural Georgia has been losing hospitals at an alarming rate. And because of that loss, we have companies leaving, we have people without access to health care, and we aren't doing the kind of economic development work we can do. With the expansion of Medicaid, we can save rural hospitals, cover more than 500,000 Georgians, and invest in all of those communities to the tune of $3 billion, including the creation of 56,000 jobs, 60% of which are outside the metro Atlanta area. I'm so bullish on Medicaid expansion because I know it works. It's a bipartisan, proven solution that even Governor Mike Pence did in the state of Indiana. Georgia has more rural hospitals on the brink of closure than almost any other state. And unless we expand Medicaid, draw down the $3 billion to which we are entitled, and invest it in Georgia, we will not be able to build the strongest rural Georgia that we need.
Ms. Abrams, thank you. Elwyn Lopez, you get the final question in this round for Brian Kemp.
Secretary Kemp, one of your ads says, reward those who follow the law and pay their taxes, not those who don't. Under DACA, there are people who are living and working in the U.S. There are about over 20,000 DACA recipients here in Georgia. They are paying their taxes but not allowed to go to some of the top colleges in this state. Do you believe DACA recipients who are paying their taxes should be allowed to go to those top colleges with in-state tuition to further contribute to our economy?
No, I do not. I've been running my whole campaign on putting Georgians first. I think we need to continue to do that. Unlike Ms. Abrams, who wants to give the Hope Scholarship and free college tuition to those that are here illegally, I think that is the wrong position to go. I think we need to continue to fight for our own people that are our own state, that are citizens of our state, and that's what I'll do as governor.
If I may respond.
You may have a rebuttal.
I've pushed for allowing any student who graduates from our high school to participate in the Hope Scholarship Program, because these are young people who were brought here not of their own volition. But in a state like Georgia, we have to lift up every opportunity to improve our economy, fill our nursing shortage in rural Georgia, and do the best we can for our economy. And I stand by believing that every Georgian who graduates from our high schools should be allowed to attend our colleges, and if they're eligible, receive the Hope Scholarship.
And Mr. Metz, we'd like to give you an opportunity as well.
On immigration, I really think that we need to have some sort of a program where people can come in and register to actually be here legally. And I've missed the question, I suppose, but I don't see immigration as a problem as other people see it, because I believe that we need more immigration in America to build the strength of America, to replace people who are not being born in America because we have such a low replacement rate. If we don't have more people in Georgia and the United States to pay into our Medicare and Medicaid system, those systems will collapse.
Candidates, thank you. That concludes the first portion of the debate. We call that the easy round. Now it's going to get a little tougher. The candidates will now ask a question to each of their opponents. Now, candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. So by random selection, Brian Kemp, you may ask the first question to Ted Metz.
Okay. Well, Mr. Metz, as you know, Ms. Abrams supports a government takeover of health care. It's a plan that will make your current insurance illegal. You will not be able to choose who your doctor is. And in her book, she says you'll have to raise income taxes and cut funding to Medicaid and Medicare to pay for this plan. My question is, what do you think of Mrs. Abrams' health care plan?
Frankly, anytime you throw more money at a broken system, it just keeps the system broken and limping along. We really need to completely reform all of our healthcare delivery systems to be more modern, to be to include better patient outcome. We need to make a model where more like a concierge approach to medicine delivery, in that, like a healthcare system, when you have a health membership, you actually pay a monthly fee, you get to go to the doctor as many times as you want, and then to cover the catastrophic things, you use a catastrophic insurance, which we can create a Georgia pool for all Georgians to participate in a catastrophic pool. And that way the Band-Aids and sniffles coverage is much more affordable, and the expensive stuff we can cover through a Georgia pool for all people in Georgia.
Anytime a candidate is named, it paves the way for a rebuttal. Ms. Abrams,
Thank you.
Your response.
Unfortunately, my opponent, Mr. Kemp, does not have a plan for health care other than saying trust your insurance companies. He has said that he will protect pre-existing conditions. However, his previous record shows that he's voted against those protections. And the Trump administration just yesterday approved the kind of innovation waivers that Mr. Kemp talks about, which include allowing shoddy plans back into Georgia that do not provide comprehensive care. I'm the only candidate with a comprehensive, proven solution that is bipartisan and that will cover 500,000 Georgians and allow everyone to have access to the health care they need.
Ms. Adams, thank you. Ted Metz, it is your turn to ask a question to Stacey Abrams.
Well, don't I get a response?
You may have a rebuttal.
I mean, because the rebuttal to the question I answered, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. As you know, Ms. Abrams' plan will make your current insurance plan illegal. It will not allow you to choose your doctor, and she's going to raise your taxes to pay for it. And if you're on Medicaid or Medicare, this should scare you to death, because in her book, she wrote that she wanted a single-payer government health care plan, and she'd cut Medicaid and Medicare to pay for it. That is going to also cause your taxes to go up. What we need is my health care plan that makes premiums more affordable, lowers prescription drug costs, will help save our rural hospitals, and also I do protect folks with pre-existing conditions. That is just absurd to think that I wouldn't do that. I'm a father of 3 daughters.
You're out of time.
Important.
Thank you for your response. I'm going to reiterate the process we have here, and you are correct. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal, so excuse me there. Next up, Ted Metz, it is your turn to ask a question of Stacey Abrams.
All right, Ms. Abrams, as has been reported in many news media outlets that Secretary Kemp has grossly mismanaged the Secretary of State's office. He said he would lead the charge to replace the voting systems, but never did. He allowed critical elections data to be exposed to the internet, and then also that data was destroyed in an erasure of the voting data. We don't even know if anyone actually hacked it. So the question is, even though that was in violation of Secretary of State retention policies, the question is, did taxpayers spend millions of dollars to defend his office? Do you think that his track record qualifies him to be promoted into a higher office?
I would say that Mr. Kemp's record as Secretary of State, as a business owner, and as a legislator demonstrate that he does not deserve a promotion in the state of Georgia. This is someone who has to be held accountable to do his basic jobs. He's been sued by the military for refusing to allow soldiers overseas to cast ballots. He was sued by nonprofit organizations for his failure to process properly thousands of registrations, and a federal judge forced him to restore 34,000 illegally canceled registrations. He accidentally twice released the information of 6 million voters, made them liable for identity theft. And he owes $500,000 to a friend that he conveniently forgets that he owes. I think his record is one that causes great concern to me and to others. I'm running for governor because I have a proven track record of leadership. I have comprehensive plans for the future of Georgia, and I have a record I'm happy to stand on and stand beside. We have to have proven leadership in the state of Georgia that will hold itself accountable and will never have to be taken to court to do its job.
Mr. Metz, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, Ms. Abrams, you sort of have similar management problems with your own checkbooks. You know, you're carrying a $50,000 IRS debt. You owe $13,000 in business liens for unpaid unemployment insurance contributions. And you carry this debt while making hundreds of thousands of dollars annually and even lending your campaign $50,000. If you can't manage your own finances and pay your own creditors, can you be trusted to manage the state budget?
Given that he invoked me in his rebuttal, if I may respond. I very proudly take care of my parents, my niece, and my grandmother. I know that you can defer your taxes, but you cannot defer cancer treatment payments for your father. I owe taxes to the federal government, and I pay those taxes. I'm on a payment plan, I am current, and I have never walked away from my responsibilities. More than that, every time I have found out that there is a challenge, I've quickly responded. I've never had to be sued to do my job. And so I would say that my responsiveness is proof that I am not only a strong leader, but I have the right priorities. Georgia values that say put family first and take care of all of your obligations. I've never shirked my responsibilities, and I never will.
Ms. Abrams, thank you so much. It is your turn to ask a question
if you don't mind,
Brian Kemp.
If you don't mind,
Stacey Abrams has the floor.
He named me in the original question that I never got to rebut to, because he also named Mrs. Abrams. So she had a chance to respond directly to him.
We will give you 20 seconds, Mr. Kemp.
Well, I don't think that's correct for you to do that. You need to.
Stacey Abrams has the floor right now. We are giving you 20 seconds to respond.
Okay. Well, all of these things they said are not true. I would encourage Georgians to look at the record. We have more voters on the roll than when I took office. I created the process for overseas and military ballots to be delivered electronically. We have made it easier to vote and hard to cheat. And just because Ms. Abrams files a false lawsuit or the New Georgia Project, it doesn't mean it's right, and we defeated that in 2014.
Mr. Kemp, you're out of time now, and you will have time to respond in your closing arguments as well. Ms. Abrams, you have the floor. You are to ask Mr. Kemp a question.
Certainly. Mr. Kemp, you have placed fighting drug trafficking gangs and rural communities as one of your top priorities. We know now that more than 3,000 local law enforcement are on food stamps due to low pay in their communities. When asked about taking action as governor, you refused to take responsibility, saying that it is not a state issue, that it should be left to the counties and local government. My question is this: why is it not the governor's responsibility to ensure that law enforcement officers protecting our state are paid a living wage?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm glad to respond to it. The state government has responded under Governor Deal's leadership, and I'm proud to have his support in this campaign. He has increased state patrol pay, other state law enforcement folks, including individuals in the Secretary of State's office. And that is the duty of the state, not of the county government. Unlike my opponent, who has using the same pot of money to pay everybody everything, your taxes will go up $13,000 per person to pay for that. That is irresponsible, and as governor, I wouldn't take part in that, and that is why I've got a plan to implement a spending cap so we can continue to have low taxes and have good paying jobs in our state. That is what will increase pay at the county level and for local law enforcement.
Ms. Abrams, would you like to respond?
Once again, my opponent, Mr. Kemp, is being misleading and using cherry-picked information. Local law enforcement does indeed hold responsibility. It's our county sheriffs that are pulling over these folks in rural counties. It's our local police officers who are on food stamps because they don't have access to what they need. And no one in the state is more outraged by drug trafficking than I am. My younger brother fights daily an addiction that is fed by these traffickers. But I will never ask law enforcement to do something without standing with them and making sure they can put food on their tables while we ask them to protect our families.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. We now go back to Mr. Kemp to ask Stacey Abrams a question.
Well, Ms. Abrams, as you know, in a recent video, you called on illegals to vote for you in this election. I was actually shocked. I had to watch that video twice. It clearly shows that you were asking for undocumented and documented folks to be part of your winning strategy. So my question is, why are you encouraging people to break the law for you in this election?
Mr. Kemp, you are very aware that I know the laws of Georgia when it comes to voting. In fact, I am one of the foremost experts in the state on expansion of voting rights. And I have never in my life asked for anyone who is not legally eligible to vote to be able to cast a ballot. What I've asked for is that you allow those who are legally eligible to vote to allow them to cast their ballots. And in fact, we took you to court in 2016, and a federal judge said that you illegally canceled 34,000 registrations. You use the exact same system, the exact match system that is under dispute right now. Now, I realize that in the next response, you're going to say that it's a function of my organization because your tendency is to blame everyone else for the mistakes that you make. My responsibility as a leader is to see a problem and try to solve it. When I saw that we had 800,000 unregistered people of color in the state of Georgia, I started an organization that has reached into every county and increased those registrations. When I saw that people were being unlawfully wrongfully denied the right to vote, I worked to make certain that we held you accountable. And as the next governor of Georgia, I will continue to do my job to make certain that every legally eligible vote that gets cast gets counted.
Ms. Abrams, thank you. Mr. Kemp, would you like to respond?
Well, thankfully, the truth here is very simple. Georgians should simply Google the clip, watch what she says. You'll know that she's talking about this election and talking about illegals voting for her in this election. They filed a lawsuit to do that, which she mentioned. But even the ICE enforcement director under the Obama administration said that she should drop out of this race because of encouraging illegals to vote in this election. That is outrageous. She knows that that is criminal. If you watch the videos yourself, you will see it firsthand.
Mr. Metz, would you like to weigh in here, out of all fairness?
Well, out of all fairness, I would like to say that, Stacey Abrams takes money from donors for the third sector development and the New Georgia Project to do a function that essentially anyone else could do, and the people themselves could go online to register to vote. They could get a ride to go and register to vote. But the thing is, she also uses that influence with other 501c3 organizations to actually do phone banking and voter drives, really specifically for her campaign. And that's a violation of 501c3 charters.
Excuse me, I have to end your thought there. Ms. Abrams, would you like to respond?
Unfortunately, my opponent, Mr. Metz, is very confused about what is at stake. My campaign, the Abrams for Georgia campaign, operates as a separate organization. I am no longer responsible for or involved in the New Georgia Project. I have never failed to meet my responsibilities as a tax attorney with a specialty in tax-exempt organization law. I have very carefully followed the law and ensured that we never cross any lines and we only work for the public good. I'm running for governor because I recognize that that public good has to happen with public and private partnerships. And I've worked hard to make certain that the nonprofit sector, the public sector, and the private sector have worked to make Georgia stronger for all.
You're out of time. Would you like to end the round with a rebuttal, Mr. Kemp?
Well, I think I've already rebutted the question I asked her. I don't believe.
Moving on to Ted Metz, then. Further. Please ask your question of Brian Kemp.
Okay, Mr. Kemp, an independent watchdog group has documented over 10 serious ethical concerns against Representative Abrams, and they filed 2 ethics complaints. These include issues such as using campaign resources to sell her books for personal profit, reimbursing herself $84,000 in campaign funds without disclosing where the money went, and inaccurate financial disclosures. Should someone of that ethical qualification really be elected as governor?
Well, I certainly share your concerns on the things that you mentioned. I appreciate that question. I would say what's more concerning is Miss Abrams being a tax attorney, is her not paying her taxes while she took the opportunity to loan her campaign $50,000 instead of doing that. I don't think I could get away with that. I don't think Mr. Metz could get away with that, and the people of Georgia couldn't get away with that. And when you're putting politics over paying the government the taxes you owe, I think that does make you unfit to be governor. And that's why even in tough times, battling through a recession and investing in a tough business deal where the company owes someone some money, my wife and I have always paid our taxes. That's what we do as Georgians, and that's the kind of governor I'll be, that will stand with integrity and the people of this state to honor the good money that they're sending us, to spend it wisely, budget conservatively, to cut taxes in the future, not raise them like Ms. Abrams.
Let's give Ms. Abrams a chance to respond.
Once again, my opponents are being very misleading. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit my family. My parents lost their church, and they lost most of their income. I stepped up and became their primary source of income. And for the last 15 years, I have taken responsibility for my parents. In 2015 and 2016, my parents faced health challenges, and my father had to have cancer treatment. You can defer tax payment. You cannot defer cancer treatment. You cannot defer responsibility for your family. I never failed to pay my bills. I pay the IRS. We have a payment plan, and that is wrong to say that I'm doing anything else.
Mr. Metz, your rebuttal.
Well, an independent watchdog group and reliable news sources that you can look up have documented at least 10 ethical concerns against you, Mr. Kemp. You used official Secretary of State website and mobile app to promote your campaign website. You reneged on your $700,000 loan and your personal guarantee, and you're being sued over it. And there's probably 13 other lawsuits that you're currently being named in. If you won't pay what you're, even you won't pay even though your net worth is many times more than the amount that you owe. And those 10 ethical violations
Mr. Metz,
should also
ask your question.
disqualify you.
Well, I think that was his
would you like to respond?
Well, I think that was his
That
rebuttal.
was my rebuttal.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Mr.
I would
Kent,
like.
would you like
I
to
would like to
respond?
respond. That's absolutely ridiculous. The many things he said. I've had a great track record of being in the private sector for 30 years. I've had the opportunity to serve in the legislature with distinction, even working with Mrs. Abrams, and she knows that full well. We've got a great record in the Secretary of State's office. Despite the mistruths that have been spoken tonight, we have more people on the rolls. I created online voter registration in our state where you can register to vote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, something Ms. Abrams voted against.
Thank you so much. Finally, Ms. Abrams, you get the final question in this round. Please address Ted Metz.
Mr. Metz, do you believe it is hypocritical that Mr. Kemp borrowed borrowed $500,000 from a friend and refused to pay it back, that he actually loaned his campaign in 2006 $50,000 while he was $1 million in debt, and that he continues to guarantee loans that are twice the amount of his net worth? Do you think it's hypocritical for him to attack anyone else when he is in the same position?
It is hypocritical, and it's also hypocritical to be in government to promote yourself, to be self-aggrandizing and self-enriching, and nobody gets rich in politics unless they're a crook, according to Harry Truman. It seems like we have a lot of issues in government where people are using their positions to get rich and enrich their friends, and that's got to stop.
Ms. Abrams, would you like to?
I think that Mr. Kemp has unfortunately created a narrative that is incomplete and inaccurate. He loaned his campaign $50,000 in 2006 when he was $1 million in debt. 91 times he told the courts that he does not owe $500,000 that he clearly owes. And this is someone who takes credit for more people registering to vote, despite the fact that he purges voters at a regular interval. We have more people in Georgia. That's why we have more voters. And I voted against the voter registration, the online registration system, because the Republicans were trying to hide judicial elections, and I thought that was unfair and wrong.
Thank you. Mr.
Well, I'd like to
Kemp, you are going
respond,
to end this round
Absolutely.
with your rebuttal.
I have paid my taxes when they were due, unlike Mrs. Abrams, in some very tough times. The company owes the individual on the loan, not me. I haven't been, that was a company debt, not mine personally. It was an investment I made. I own 8% of that company. After 30 years in business and fighting through the recession, I'm proud of that record. No one has made it easier to vote and harder to cheat in our state. And it's really outrageous that while we're talking about all these voting issues on both of these folks up here, I've actually taken the lead on these issues.
Mr.
We're
Kemp,
having record turnout
thank you.
right now.
You are out of time. I told you this round was going to be a little tougher. That concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is a debate between candidates for governor of Georgia, and we want to thank you so much for joining us. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidates of his or her choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions, and I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. So we are ready for our last and final round here. Frank Malloy, you get the first question in this round.
All right, this question will be for both Ms. Abrams and Secretary Kemp. The Husqvarna plant in Telfair County in southeast Georgia recently announced it would close next year, possibly taking with it more than 1,000 jobs unless a new buyer is found. How do you go about trying to replace those types of jobs in rural counties like Telfair County and others in southeast and central Georgia? Ms. Abrams, we'll start with you.
Unfortunately, there is no way to bring companies back to communities without stabilizing those communities first. It's not a question of chicken and egg. It's a question of horse and cart. And the horse is Medicaid expansion. It will create 56,000 jobs in Georgia, 60% of which are outside of the metro Atlanta area. It will provide access to health care, and it will help stabilize those economies. But beyond that, I'm the only candidate with a plan to actually invest in small businesses in South Georgia. I believe that we should create a $10 million small business financing fund, which will help small businesses get the capital they need, both those that are starting up and those that wish to expand and add a couple of new folks. We have to invest our dollars in our communities. Unfortunately, my opponent has scoffed at the notion of taxpayer investment in these communities, although he borrowed $3.6 million, signed for a federal loan for his company. I don't understand why it's right for him and not right for the rest of Georgia.
Secretary Kemp, your response to the question about trying
Well,
to replace jobs?
I appreciate the answer, but expanding a broken government program is no answer to solving the problem, nor is taking $10 million of taxpayer money and start loaning it out. The government, I can assure you that small community-based banks know full well how to loan money out to hardworking Georgians better so than the government. That is why I have a plan to strengthen rural Georgia. I've been to all 159 counties, and I know how to create jobs. I've been doing it for 30 years. And expanding government programs is not the way to do it. Our workforce is leaving those areas. They're aging out. Young people are leaving. What we need is a governor that's going to fight for opportunity in rural Georgia. No one has done that earlier and quicker than I have with our plan. And people know it because we've been working with all those counties as Secretary of State when we've been creating access for voters and easier ways for people to register to vote. That is a record that people in rural Georgia can trust.
Mr. Kemp, thank you. Mr. Metz, we want to keep you in the discussion here. Do you have a response? Do you have any thoughts?
I certainly
here?
do have a response. I mean, the obvious answer is we are an agricultural state and we need more agricultural products. Industrial hemp is a product that can create jobs in Georgia and create prosperity. There are 25,000 different uses of industrial hemp, from fiber to food to fuel to industrial chemicals. Anything that oil can do, hemp can do in a carbon negative fashion. We could actually reduce the carbon problem we have with global warming by using hemp to suck the carbon dioxide out of the air. There's a lot of things we can do with industrial hemp. The World Health Organization has called for replacing Similac and other soy-based baby formulas with hemp. 8,000 pounds of seeds can be produced from 1 acre of industrial hemp, and that can go right into baby food, which is a much better protein complex, much better carbohydrates, much better omega-3 fatty acids. I mean, everything can be done with hemp.
Mr. Metz, thank you. Elwin Lopez, it's your turn to ask a question tonight.
Secretary Kemp, the DEA considers Atlanta to be a main hub for Mexican drug cartel operations. You've said that street gangs and drug cartels are a huge issue here in Georgia and that you have a plan to keep families safe from this. Former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said last year that we Americans are the market for those drugs. The demand for those illegal drugs is here in the United States. What programs, if any, will you put in place to reduce the drug demand here in our state?
Well, as you know, I've been talking about that issue. I'm very passionate about it. As a father of 3 teenage daughters, I'm seeing it every day with school-aged children, folks that are in college, hardworking Georgians. The drug epidemic is facing all of our state. It doesn't matter what demographic, what area of our state, and I plan to do something about it. I've got 2 plans to go after drug cartels and street gangs, and I'll also work with our local law enforcement and prosecutors. And no one has taken the lead on this issue. We've got to raise public awareness. I want to work with Attorney General Chris Carr to create a strike force as well to give counties that don't have resources to go after drug cartels and gangs what they need to solve that problem. Unlike my opponent, Mrs. Abrams, who has voted against increased penalties for law enforcement, she's not going to stand with them, and I will, to fight this good fight.
Ms. Abrams, a 30-second rebuttal.
Mr. Kemp has praised a bill that was passed to fight gangs as the strongest in the nation. I helped pass that bill. I'm the only candidate here who actually worked on a gang task force as a college student because I'm very familiar with the challenges not only of gang violence, but also of the drug epidemic. I have a younger brother who grapples with drug addiction, and that is why I'm not only bullish on public safety and investing in our local law enforcement so they can do their jobs, we also have to create a network of mental health and substance abuse treatment, which can only be done through the expansion of Medicaid, especially in our rural communities that need it desperately.
Thank you so much. Greg, you've been waiting patiently over here. I know you have a loaded question. It is your turn to ask a question tonight.
I'm going to ask another criminal justice related question to you, Ms. Abrams. The city of Atlanta recently eliminated the cash bond requirement for some offenders, and it's resulted in a large increase in the number of people failing to appear for their court date. You've called for a similar statewide measure. If Atlanta struggles to implement this policy, why is it a good idea for the state to implement it?
I've worked for the last 8 years with Governor Nathan Deal on criminal justice reform, and in fact, in 2018, he signed legislation to help reduce cash bail because we recognize that it criminalizes being poor. I think using Atlanta as an example is a poor example because at the same time that Atlanta put this program in place, their cybersecurity was hijacked. We do not know if it's a challenge that's based on failure to appear because of lack of information, because they are not able to work their systems, or if it's directly related to the cash bail system. But I will tell you that across the country, in states that have imposed this system, they have seen return rates that are equal to those who are on that have access to cash bail, but they're also seeing that poor people aren't losing their jobs and being forced out of the economy because of crimes that they may or may not have committed. Criminal justice reform cannot stop in 2018. We must continue to fight for it. And I look forward to continuing Nathan Deal's legacy. This is one area where we have reduced cost, we have increased productivity, and we've made our streets safer. If you want to help reduce crime, let's make certain recidivism isn't part of the issue.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. The focus of tonight's debate is to tackle the issues and concerns of the people here in Georgia. Yet the issue regarding voter suppression has created this astronomical sidebar to this election, and we touched on it earlier tonight, but I think we need to delve into it a little more, and I have questions for all three of you. Mr. Kemp, you have been our Secretary of State since 2010. Can you stand here tonight and say, as overseer of our state's elections, there is no attempt on your part or your campaign's part to suppress the minority vote that would likely benefit a minority candidate who you are in a statistical dead heat according to recent polls?
Absolutely not. And voters should look at the numbers and know that this is all a distraction to take away from Ms. Abrams' extreme agenda that she has for a government takeover of health care, wanting to give the Hope Scholarship to those that are here illegally, in many, many other radical positions, having to raise taxes for $13,000 per person in our state to pay for all of this. If you look at the numbers, minority participation in Georgia is up 23%. We have 1 million more people on our voter rolls today than we had when I took office. We've had record turnouts in our last presidential election, and we're having record turnouts right now. And this farce about voter suppression and people being held up from being on the rolls and being able to vote is absolutely not true. Anyone who meets the requirements that's on the pending list, all they have to do is do the same thing that you and I at home have to do. Go to your polling location, show your government ID, and you can vote. But 75% of those individuals missed the Social Security match, which is a federal problem.
Ms. Abrams, would you like to respond?
I would indeed. The right to vote is a right. I grew up in a family that fought for the right to vote before they were old enough to do so. My father was arrested helping people register, and so I take the right to vote very seriously. I only believe that those who have the legal eligibility to vote should cast a ballot. But I also understand that under Secretary Kemp, more people have lost the right to vote in the state of Georgia. They've been purged, they've been suppressed, and they've been scared. This is a man who had someone arrested for helping her blind father cast a ballot. He raided the offices of organizations to stop them from registering voters. That type of voter suppression feeds the narrative, because voter suppression isn't only about blocking the vote. It's also about creating an atmosphere of fear, making people worry that their votes won't count. As the next governor of Georgia, I will work with the Secretary of State to ensure that there is no question that the right to vote in Georgia is not a privilege. It is indeed a right that belongs to those who are Georgia citizens, and I will work hard to make it so.
Mr. Kemp, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, that's just factually not true. 75% of the people, after you take off people that were pending, like my 17-and-a-half-year-old daughter was pending on the pending list. When she turned 18, she came off. When you take off people that had registered that had a potential double name, or when you count people like Jesus from Heaven Street that are on these lists, they are on the pending list. No one's keeping them from voting. 75% of the people are being held because of something that was pre-cleared through the Obama Justice Department because their Social Security number didn't match. If they'd have used the online system that Ms. Abrams voted against, they would not be having this issue. She is blaming me for a problem that her group created.
Ms. Abrams, we'll give you a chance to respond, but we do want to get Mr. Metz involved here. You can expound on the initial question, or I have a particular question for you. You represent the Libertarian Party. You're polling far behind your two frontrunners here. Does the issue of possible voter suppression strike a nerve with you? And would you go as far as justifying the concerns of a lot of people out there that this race is being rigged?
I feel as if it's much ado about nothing. The real issue here is if you look at the voter turnout for past elections, less than 60% of the voters ever actually turn out. The most recent Pew nationwide survey showed that 40% of people identified as independents, less than 30% of people identified as Republicans, and less than 30% identified as Democrats. The problem is that we don't have a third voice in government for independents to actually listen to and to vote for. So the whole thing about the voter suppression, this and that, you know, they're trying to pull us apart and vote for one of the two teams. There are more people that are more interested in hearing a third voice than voting for Team Red or Team Blue. So again, I don't think it's as large of an issue as it's being blown up to be.
Lastly, I promised questions for all of you. Ms. Abrams, this one is for you, and you can expound on that while you're answering this. But the pending applicants, the 53,000, still have an opportunity to vote by law once their information is cleared. Do you trust that process? And if not, how will you seek immediate intervention since your campaign stands to lose the most?
I begin by saying this. I believe anyone who has submitted an eligible registration form should try to vote. If you're on the pending list, absolutely go and cast a ballot. But the reality is voter suppression is not simply about being told no. It's about being told it's going to be hard to cast a ballot. And that's the deeper concern that I have. Because under his 8 years of leadership, Mr. Kemp has created an atmosphere of fear around the right to vote in the state of Georgia. I've worked hard as a leader in the state. I did not vote against online registration. I voted against hiding our judicial elections in primaries, which is what Republicans were doing to reduce turnout. I have voted for absolutely protecting the right to vote and expanding that right to vote. I did it not only as a legislator, I did it as a private citizen who raised money to make certain that the least likely voters would have an opportunity to have their voices heard. And I stand by that work. And a federal judge held Mr. Kemp accountable for the exact match system in 2016. That is the same system we're debating today. Whether it's 53,000 or 5,000 or 5.
Abrams,
if even 5 Georgians are being denied the right to vote or afraid of the right to vote, then we are not doing our job as the guardians of the public trust.
Mr. Kemp, 30 seconds.
Yeah, no one's being denied the right to the vote. It's never been easier to register in our state. If Miss Abrams' folks that she's registering with paper applications had used the online system and were using their state-issued ID or their Georgia ID, they would not be having these problems. The reason they're having these problems is because her canvassers didn't fill the form out correctly. They couldn't get the last 4 digits of the Social Security right. That issue was pre-cleared by the Obama Justice Department. If you want to blame somebody, blame President Obama. We are following the law in Georgia. This has been going on for 50 years, and that is why we have a record number of people on the rolls. There's 7 million people that have correctly filled the form out, and she's blaming me for a few that couldn't do that, or they simply don't exist. 14% of these people are held over from 2014 when she accused me of doing something. We went to court, and we won on all 10 counts.
Out of fairness to our other panelists, they have questions as well. We're going to continue with
them. If I may ask, he did
30 seconds, please.
Very quickly. First and foremost, in 2014, what the judge said was not that he acquitted Mr. Kemp. What he said was that there was no legal basis because he had no obligation to actually do his job in a timely fashion. That's because in the state of Georgia, you are not required to timely process applications. And it's very misleading to suggest otherwise. But the larger issue is this. Online voter registration works in communities that have broadband. Going back to Mr. Malloy's question, one of the things I would do is expand access to rural broadband because you can't do online voting in communities where you can't get access to a cell phone or to a computer.
Thank you very much. We'll continue with Frank Malloy.
This will be for all of you. How do you convince voters in Central and South Georgia that you care about what they think and that the what's best for the Atlanta metro area is best for Georgia philosophy won't hold true under your leadership? Mr. Metz, we'll start with you.
Well, we're going to start again with industrial hemp, allowing farmers to grow a crop that can give them a cash crop that actually is something that's important, that can save the environment, that can save the soil, et cetera, is the first step to prove to the farmers in rural Georgia that we care about them. The other thing is we can do all sorts of things with table, farm to table distribution systems. We got 7 counties in Georgia that don't even have a grocery store. You know, the thing is, we need to be encouraging our agriculture and getting them to actually grow food rather than just the big cash crops, the monocultures that they're doing, which is destroying the cropland. Another thing that we can do for rural Georgia is actually do a rural broadband based on long-range Wi-Fi. It's cheap, it's simple, it can be co-located with the cell phone towers. We can also allow nurses and practitioners to write prescriptions, and we can also use telemedicine to make rural Georgians get better health care. And that's about all I have to say for that.
Thank you, and you were right on time. We appreciate that very much. Elwin Lopez, you get the next question.
Ms. Abrams, 75% of Georgia voters favor expanding Medicaid. That's according to an AJC poll from January. You said that you want to expand the program on day one. How likely is that with a Republican state legislature, and how would you be able to achieve that on day one or even during your first year in office?
So what I've said is that my day one priority is expansion of Medicaid. I've been through 11 legislative sessions. I know it takes a little bit longer than one day. But I will say this, having worked across the aisle, having worked with Democrats and Republicans, I know that we all care about Georgia families. It's one of our core values. And I know that we do not want to see more rural hospitals close. Unfortunately, there is only one solution in the state of Georgia. And despite the misleading information from my opponent, I am not promoting anything other than a program that has been proven to be bipartisan. Governor Mike Pence expanded Medicaid. We know that it works. We know that it is a bipartisan solution that will help cover 500,000 Georgians, will create 56,000 jobs, will cost us approximately $250 million, will draw down $3 billion, and will help stabilize the rural economies. There is no other solution. Now, my opponent is going to say something about innovation waivers, but the reality is that those innovation waivers are shoddy plans that have been dismissed by most states and will allow pre-existing conditions to once again not be covered in the state of Georgia.
Thank you so much. Greg, you have the next question.
Secretary Kemp, this is kind of a follow-up. Your $600 million teacher pay raise proposal would account for more than 2/3 of the state's typical revenue growth. So where do you cut or raise new revenue to make that a reality?
Well, I'm really proud of my education plan, giving teachers a pay raise, investing in public education, a robust school safety plan. I can assure you that us providing a school counselor in every high school to deal with behavioral health issues, giving one-time grants of $30,000 to our local schools, every public school in the state, to secure our schools and keep our children safe. Nothing is more important than that to me than that, being a father of 3 teenage daughters. But look, we have all this accounted for. Unlike my opponent, who wants to take the same bucket of money that's out there through revenue and growth and give it to several different pots, we're only offering it to what we can afford. That's why I have a spending cap proposal so that we can lower taxes next year, also pay for our school teacher pay raise plan and our school safety plan, and we've accumulated and accounted for that in the budget through natural growth that we've had in this great economy.
In an effort to quickly tackle some of the other important issues to Georgia, I'd like to give the other two candidates 20 seconds to respond to the issue of education. What's important to each of you in terms of reforming education for our state? Mr. Metz, we'll begin with you.
Well, to begin with, we have an overload of administrators. We got about 10,000 administrators, 110,000 teachers, and 1.7 million students. We can reduce the number of administrators and then actually take the teachers to start teaching to the student rather than teaching to a test.
Thank you so much. Ms. Abrams, 20 seconds on your education plan.
I would invest in early childhood education, expanding access, especially in our rural communities. I would make certain that we fully fund our K-12 formula, including wraparound services so that children don't come to school hungry or in need of mental health. And I would make certain that our teachers not only get a pay raise, but that we actually protect their retirement. I intend not to be an education governor, but the public education governor. And we can pay for this in part by repealing the private vouchers that are currently draining $100 million from our budget.
Thank you so much. With 2 minutes left in this debate, quickly give me your views, 20 seconds each of you, on criminal justice reform. Mr. Metz.
I think my day one of being the governor would be to issue a proclamation to stop police and law enforcement from arresting people for possession of small amounts of cannabis for the personal consumption. That would unclog the court system. It would reduce the fear in the youth that would cause them to shoot a police officer for fear of being arrested. Furthermore, we also need to go through and teach our jurors how to be a good juror by acquitting people of a crime that has no victim. We can unclog the court system, and that's a great best thing I can do.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Mr. Kemp, 20 seconds, please.
I certainly support the good work of Governor Deal and the legislature on criminal justice reform. I think in the future, though, our next step is to have robust public safety reform, which includes my 2 plans to stop and dismantle gangs and to go after drug cartels. There is not a more important issue to myself or my wife, Marty, and the father of 3 teenage daughters than to keep our families safe, and that is exactly what I will do as your governor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kemp. Ms. Abrams, 20 seconds, please.
We have done great work under Governor Nathan Deal on criminal justice reform, but we're not done yet. We need to decriminalize being poor in the state of Georgia. That means decriminalizing certain traffic offenses. We need to make certain that we lower the age at which a juvenile can be treated, raise an age at which a juvenile can be treated as an adult. But we also have to do the work of transition. Those who are coming out of our prisons and going back into our communities need the supports of housing and access to jobs. And we have to have stronger public safety and community safety. That's why I want to make certain that our local law enforcement, those county sheriffs, have access to the funding that they need to take care of their families.
In fairness, I have to interrupt. One final question tonight from Mr. Bloomstein.
And this is a yes-no question because we're short on time. Governor Deal just today announced a special session after the election designed to provide more hurricane relief, but lawmakers will also get the chance to make permanent a jet fuel tax break for Delta and other air carriers. Yes or no, would you support that tax break? Mr. Metz, you first. Sorry.
No.
Mr. Kemp?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, time come for closing statements from each of our candidates. Stacey Abrams, you get the first closing statement this evening.
Well, I want to thank Georgians for tuning in and listening to this conversation. There's a lot of disagreement about who we are, but there is no disagreement in my mind about where we need to go. This is a state that needs to move forward, that needs to recognize that we all deserve to live in a place where everyone has the freedom and the opportunity to thrive. I'm the only candidate not only with a strong record of bipartisan leadership, but with clear, comprehensive, specific plans about what we do next. Educating our children from cradle to career, investing in our small businesses, especially those that can't access bank loans, making sure that we are creating new jobs through advanced energy, that we're strengthening our agricultural sector and our hospitality sector, but that we're bringing new jobs, that we are supporting our local law enforcement by making sure that those who are protecting us with their lives can put food on their tables. And we have to expand Medicaid. That's creating 500,000 new jobs. That's putting money into communities. I've learned the values of family, faith, service, and responsibility from my parents, and those are the values I will take when I lead Georgia, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Ms. Abrams, thank you so much. Ted Metz, please give us your closing statement.
Thank you. I am here before you to ask for your vote. This is going to be a runoff anyway. If you're tired of the two-party system and the two-party tyranny of the oligarchs running the planet, then a vote for me is a protest vote to show them that you're sick and tired of the same old stuff. Basically, being a libertarian is leave me alone, don't tell me what to do, and don't steal my stuff. I'm running to end corruption, also to hold government accountable, and to lower taxes. There's lots of ways to do that by stuffing government back inside of its constitutional constraints. Many people have forgotten that the Constitution is about holding government accountable to a small group of functions, which include an equal playing field, making sure that everyone has equal protection under the law, as well as providing protection for our property and for our happiness. And we don't get that out of government anymore. Government is in everything that we do, and everything that we do has to have permission from government. It's time to stop.
Mr. Metz, thank you. Brian Kipp, it is your turn.
This election is a fight for our future. My opponent has run the most dishonest campaign Georgians have ever seen, and here's why. She's lying about my record to hide her extreme agenda. She wants higher taxes, bigger government, a single-payer, radical government takeover of health care, and those are her moderate positions. She also wants to give taxpayer benefits, welfare, and free college tuition to those here illegally. And she's even asking illegals to vote for her in this race. Not even California is that liberal. But with your vote, You can end this craziness. And as governor, I'll invest in public education and give teachers a raise. I'll cut taxes and lower health care costs. And I'll continue to streamline government, fight for our conservative values, including our Second Amendment, protect the Hope Scholarship, and keep our classrooms safe for our children. This race is about the soul of our future, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you to all of you. You can exhale now. We got through the hour. Everyone give yourselves a round of applause. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, and early voting has begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to the panel of journalists who took part tonight. I want to thank you. I would also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. For more information on the full schedule of general election debates, please visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. The Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting lost a longtime member of the debate series family. This happened in July. Tom Crawford reported on Georgia politics for more than 3 decades and was considered the dean of state capitol journalists. We dedicate tonight to him. I'm Lisa Rayam. Thank you so much for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk-Young debate series. Have a wonderful evening.